Hi, I'm Richard Hawes and I'm the Chief Executive at Elizabeth Finn Care Homes. We operate 10 homes across the country from Exeter in the southwest to Harrogate in North Yorkshire and across to Ipswich on the east coast. The homes range from about 35 beds up to over 60 beds, and are generally in a country setting.
Rashwood is a care home, which means it's a nursing home and a residential home. We have 40 nursing beds and 13 residential beds. We provide full nursing care for some residents that are suffering from disorders such as MS, motor neurone disease. We do an awful lot of palliative care, which is what we've become known for, really. We also have the residential wing, which is good because if people can stay there as long as possible, they do. But then we have the option that they move over to the nursing side, so they don't have to lose their home, move their home. They can stay here and end their days here.
When I joined Elizabeth Finn, we already had some form of electronic care planning, although it was quite a dated system, and the data itself wasn't easy to analyse and get information from. I'd worked with electronic medication systems previously and recognised that the benefits they could deliver to both the staff and the safety to the service, and that goes as well for care planning systems. And so one of the things that I wanted to do very early on in my tenure at Elizabeth Finn was to bring those systems up to date. We used a very paper-based system for medication management, so there was real opportunities there to increase the safety aspect of it. So part of the reason we wanted to go down the tech route was that I'd worked with tech before in care homes. I see it as in this day and age as an integral part of delivering care. We use air mattresses to prevent pressure sores for vulnerable people. The amount of medication errors that historically have happened in care homes is huge, some unreported as well. So for me, using electronic medication is no different to using an air mattress. It helps to protect our residents, support our staff, and protect them as well from making mistakes. And there are efficiencies as well. So when you first implement tech, it takes longer to do something that you historically did on paper that you could do probably very quickly because you're familiar with it. Once you introduce tech into it, it becomes a more complex process to begin with, but over time it actually becomes much faster once people get used to using the systems. Delivering medications, for instance, the time that takes gets shorter and shorter all the time, and so the benefit of that is to our residents in that staff have more free time to support our residents. In terms of making a business case, it is absolutely not to do it on finances. It is to do it on the quality improvement, because that's our culture. Our culture is about providing the best quality of service to the people that come into our homes. So we wanted a medication system and a care planning system that link to each other. Because there are lots of medication systems and there are a lot of care planning systems, but they don't necessarily talk to each other. And so part of the reason we made the decision to go with Access was that they had two systems that would integrate, and you put the residents' details in once. And that was a really important thing for our staff.
So the Access system here that we use is all the care planning and all the EMAR, which is the electronic drug regimes. The care plans are built on forms being filled out at point of care by the nurses or the carers. All the data is inputted into the forms, and that forms the care plans. So there's no paper copy that will be immediately out of date. The input is straight onto the system so that all the information is right up to date.